Rosie, you can turn around and wave. Derek, André, all are here who are going to join us. We have a quick Q&A, panel discussion on some of the things that we just kind of went through. So I'm going to ask you guys to come on up. So just afterwards, I learned a couple of little fun facts. So one person up here, and I'm not going to tell you who it is, so you can find this out afterwards, graduated university at the age of 15. Yeah, whoa. And then one always wanted to be and came close to being a professional ice hockey player. So I'm not going to say which one is which, and you guys can find out afterwards. So first off, thank you guys, and maybe we can spend just 30 seconds each. Sam, I think you probably have gotten your introduction.
Is that good?
Can you hear?
Good. Yeah, you got a good intro to me from Anna, so I'll pass on.
Thanks, guys. Hi, I'm Rosie. I'm the brand marketing director at Time Out, so I'm responsible for both parts of our brand. Time Out is obviously well known as being a media brand, but over the course of the last couple of years, we've moved into hospitality and leisure. So we opened Time Out Market in Lisbon 5 years ago. Some of you guys might have been, and we've just opened 5 more in North America, 1 this week. So I hope that everything's going all right there while I'm here.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is André, and I am the head of graphic design within the product innovation function at Photobox. And essentially, I am very rarely in today's times am purely looking over print design. So I oversee all of the graphics that go into our customers' products that they purchase, and also the packaging that it comes in. And then in my spare time at work, I've kind of started my own little startup within the business that is centered around doing bespoke design work for customers around their weddings.
Hi everyone, my name's Derek. I'm lead brand designer at TransferWise. We're actually just 3 floors up from here, and we're still late. What we look after at TransferWise is we're basically the best way to send money internationally. I lead the brand design team at TransferWise, and what that essentially means is that we look after the brand system, and we're building a consistent way for our TransferWise to communicate externally and internally to all our customers and potential new customers.
Awesome. There we go. Thank you. So I appreciate you all joining us here today. You've heard some really interesting anecdotes from Interbrand and some of the things about iconic moves and how changing shape with your consumers is really going to affect the long-term experience or exchange that you have with those customers. So maybe there's some things that you could talk about a little bit that you think in 2020 your organizations might be considering when it comes to either iconic moves or some of the trends to tap into. I don't know.
I'll go first because I've got a mic.
Yeah, by the way, just for the record, Derek is the resident expert on all things. We've learned as well.
I know most things, so ask me any questions. It's fine.
Perfect.
Yeah. So one of the trends that's a massive thing at TransferWise that we always work towards and that we'll be working towards in the future is consistency. Because TransferWise is a fintech, we're a new fintech startup and we deal with people's money, people get very nervous around trusting their money with somebody that's fairly new in the market. So I can talk about when I started at TransferWise, we had no consistency whatsoever. So you could go to our website and you could scroll down and there were different type styles, colors, buttons, photography, and it was a complete mess. And if somebody had then if you'd even convinced a customer to then make a transfer, they would then get a communication from us that was a plain text email, which is absolutely crazy. So people would then call us up and say, is this email real? Is this spam? Like, what are you doing to me? You're stressing me out, type of thing. So we're working really, so the consistency is such a big part of TransferWise brand experience because the consistency builds familiarity, it builds recognition, and that ultimately leads to trust. And that's how we can build a community around people who will trust their money with a company they'd not thought of using before.
Yeah,
I'll tap into this. Kind of the big one that resonates with me very directly is really that social aspect, especially around ecocentrism, because it is such an important part of just the world that we live in today. And being in a company that ships out product to customers and have been working on packaging, I've been working with my product designer to really try to reduce the amount of plastics that we are sending our packaging in. And I know it sounds quite on trend with everything else, but really it's important, and it is something that resonates very much even outside of the physical aspect of our packaging in terms of the design ethos that I feel that our brand should have, that having something that's so manufactured like plastic feels quite off balance with the brand versus having something that's a little bit more eco-forward, like recycled paper or craft, has a warmth to it that really resonates better with that handmade aspect that our brand does put forward. So again, like I said, I know it's quite obvious to kind of eliminate plastics, but in that same vein, it's obvious because it's really important.
So I think for us, consistency is key, but we also are really focused on flexibility of how we're using our brand. Obviously, when you've been a media brand that's been going since the 60s, it's a really different dynamic to what you need for a food hall. So for us, I'm sure we've made some mistakes here and there, but in terms of trying to make sure that those two brands, because they are two brands, although they're under the one umbrella, are consistent with each other, but also knowing that it's not a one size fits all for both pieces. So that element of having kind of flexible typography and making sure that we're using fonts that have that use is going to be really important for us moving forward, I think.
So it's actually, all three of you are really focused on consistency, which is great. For maybe some of the folks that might be struggling with that, right? I think we've kind of shown that consistency is valuable, but maybe you can talk a little bit about either internally how you've been able to get people to focus on that, or give suggestions on where to start for 2020.
I can start since I've got the mic this time, Derek, all right? For us, there's a couple of things, and it's a bit dull, a bit practical, but we have a marketing review system. So we really trust our designers. We work really closely with them to make sure that the brand guidelines are always front of mind. Everybody across the business has to do brand guideline training. They don't do it all the time, but just so that they know what they're looking for. That means that business as usual runs pretty easily. We don't have a whole bulk of mistakes, although the odd one slips through. But if we're doing anything that's unusual or out of the box, that has to run through the marketing review. And that gives me and the brand creative director as well a chance just to make sure that that feels on brand and is consistent. We're a brand that have someone in Lisbon doing something completely dissimilar to someone in London, and we have to make sure that we're doing the best that we can at every single opportunity. So it is practical, but those things just help us to make sure that things are aligned across the whole business.
I think André wants, or Sam, go ahead.
Do I? Okay. I think it's very clear, especially us as brand people who work in brand, that consistency is very important. And while I don't personally work within the brand function, I know my brand team has done a really great job in making sure that two things. One, that they really empower our other teams to kind of help create that content, because for my team being on the physical product side, we know the product from the beginning parts when it's in our head out to it being to our customer. And so they allow us to be able to kind of create content and help support the story behind those products. But they've also done a really good job in setting up guidelines that are broadcast regularly across the business. They're always available, but then they also have kind of a checks and balances in terms of making sure that the stuff that we are putting out is on brand. So for example, with this wedding stuff, I kind of created it all at once very quickly, but I was able to work with my creative director to kind of get it to a place where it felt like our brand, but also felt unique in its own right. And it's that just kind of trust within your brand teams and trust within, their trust in you that really helps kind of make sure that those that consistency goes through, and it still allows you to have that level of creativity that you need to really just get your job done.
Just a quick one. When I started at TransferWise, there was 450 people and there was one designer. That one designer was me. And I cried myself to sleep most nights because there was no consistency there. So how we tackled it at TransferWise is we built out a brand system which allowed us to not just have consistency but coherency. So in a sense of, we don't expect everything to look the same, but if everything looks and feels and sounds like it's come from one place, then that's really good, because it allows the different teams to express themselves in the way they need to.
That's great. Yeah, I don't know, Sam, if you want to jump in here from a consistency standpoint, how Interbrand thinks about this when you're working.
I mean, yeah, it's massive. It's one of the, I didn't dwell too long on the brand strength factors, but
Yep.
it's one of the 10 ways we assess brand. And then there's that's the external bit of it. There's also a governance, which is basically like, do the people in the business take it really seriously as well? Because it's yeah, as everyone knows, it's fine if in theory to have consistency, but if it's not governed that way, then it disappears. So yeah, no, it's massive. And I think the MasterCard work is interesting to me because of that like simplification for a digital world, and there's great data about how digital is rewiring our brains to have a shorter attention span, and the science looks quite robust to me. And so it's probably generally true that that our use of mobiles especially is changing literally how we understand the world around us. And I think the consistency point is so important there, because people don't have the time or want to take the time to be like, oh, is it real? If you have any doubt, to Derek's point, like, if I have any doubt, I don't trust this anymore. And I've been that customer actually. I think even on TransferWise in the early days. But
Hey, he's only one guy. Leave him alone.
but hey, I
doing all he can.
actually love TransferWise's brand, and I'm not just saying that was it here. So yeah, I've been that customer of financial institutions where I'm like, I can't believe this has come from a company who want me to trust them with my money. So yeah, more important than ever.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I found interesting in either talking to you all or hearing from other customers is that piece of governance, right? How do we operationalize this internally? How do we get buy-in from the rest of the organization? So I'm curious if there are things that maybe Interbrand does. I don't know if it's on the change management side
there's sort of governance and brand governance would be part of it. But one of the big things that we're saying is if you if you want to get buy-in to anything from an organization, then like telling them is not enough. You need to kind of involve them and so on. So that's kind of, governance is definitely part of that. But with brand thinking in general, we're kind of more and more conscious that if you've if you're redefining what a brand's about, taking them in a new direction, if you kind of go into the internal side of that thinking, we're just going to tell these people and they're going to love it, it kind of usually misfires these days. I mean, maybe it used to work, I don't know, maybe people are just more rebellious these days, but it definitely, in our world, it definitely works better if it feels like a collaboration from earlier, and governance is part of that, but there's more to it, we think.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone has any.
The only thing that I'd add is we've just recently redone our brand guidelines, because between Timeout Markets and Timeout, it was something like 85 pages long. And when you're taking that to your staff, that's, like the designers, yeah, for sure. People like me, they'll be like, okay, yeah, I understand all this. I've taken it all in because it's your world. But if you're talking to people who aren't, that's not their world. It's not good enough. And it, for us, like, we just wanted to scale it back and have something that was really simple, 4 or 5 things that everybody has to remember. And it does make a big difference, because if people always know they need to stick to those parameters, simplifying it. I still have my 85-page document, but no one else wants to look at it anymore.
Just a short note, I think I agree with the whole idea around governance, but I think that also governance being used as using collaboration to kind of execute that governance is really what's key, and that's really what I've seen in my experience that makes all of that brand consistency actually work out. But without there's no butting heads that happen. So there's that level of collaboration, and the 2 heads are better than 1. It's true. It's just what it is.
At TransferWise, what we try to do is we have a brand guideline site, which is very, very light. And the reason it's light is because we have such a wide range of people working in our company. So bankers, ex-bankers, people who worked in compliance, lawyers, they don't really care about that stuff, but they need to be able to reference it when they can, so it's accessible for them.
Yep.
So it's not just a realm of designers. So two things we try to do is educate people outside of design, through the importance of brand, and we try to reiterate it again and again. And another thing that we do is every single person who joins TransferWise goes for a brand onboarding session, and I basically shout at them and say, brand isn't a logo, brand is tone of voice, visuals, whatever it may be, but overall communications.
Yeah, I think James over there is getting excited hearing about everyone on the onboarding having to go through the brand standard. James is our creative director, and we actually just went through a rebrand ourselves using our new typeface Helvetica Now, and I think we ended up with 550 different customer touch points, and we're not done from a brand perspective. And we involved, it was probably close to 100 people across 8 different departments. So that's one of the ways that we found success in dealing with the brand, is to get them involved in actually identifying where those customer experience touch points are, and having them work on them alongside the brand team. Switching gears a little bit is, when we think about experience, and whether it's just mainly in an online fashion where there's been a lot of offline work on the timeout side, certainly. What are some of the things that you're thinking about for 2020? Maybe we'll start, Rosie, with you.
Sure. So I think the first thing about timeout is that we think of ourselves as kind of against the current, right? Everything in your world is trying to pull you back into your house. So that's Deliveroo, it's Netflix, it's all of those brands that are like, you don't even need to leave, everything can come to you. And what timeout is about, and this is markets and the media as well, is like showing you the best places to go in your city, giving you the best recommendations. So we're kind of in this little battle with everybody else. But what I think that gives us is such a huge opportunity to do really cool and interesting experiential things. So a big part of our business is not just what we do on our own, but what we do with clients who work with us. So that could be brands like Nescafe, could be brands like Cadbury's, all these types of companies come to us and say, hey, what can we do with you that's beyond the realm of print and advertising? So we have a centralized creative solutions team who help us power up events, like we just did a big event series with Deliveroo. And that's brilliant because we get the benefit from both sides, we get the audiences from both sides, and we get to actually do something that brings time out to life. I realize we're in a lucky and a unique position because we have the audience, and we have that kind of brand which allows us to do that. But I think it's really, really important, especially for us. But the idea of having people out and about and actually experiencing your brand, so they're seeing it online and they see it on social, and that's, for us, it's not enough. And that's why, in a way, the timeout market came about. Just so in case anyone doesn't know this story, but basically our editor in Lisbon was like, I'm going to fill a place with all of the places that us editors here in Lisbon have ranked 5 stars around the city. And at the time, everyone was like, okay, cool, you go do your thing. And it's now the most visited tourist attraction in the whole of Portugal. So it's significant, the fact that people, they do still want to go out, they do still want to go experience these things. You've just got to make sure that it's something that people want.
Yeah, that's great. And I have not been to the one in Boston yet, but everyone has said it's absolutely phenomenal, and it's the talk of the town, just like in Lisbon.
Yeah, so experience is absolutely key for us at Photobox as well. In fact, this year, I've heard my CEO say it probably a billion times that it's the year of the customer in terms of their experience, and it's probably tattooed on him somewhere, I'm sure. But it's really important because before I kind of joined Photobox, I think Photobox was kind of a place where you can put a photo on a mug, or a place where you can kind of make a calendar. But there's been a lot of brand work around positioning the brand as a gifting company. And it's really kind of focusing on that experience of that special moment when someone's opening up a gift, and just that feeling that a loved one has when they've opened the gift that you've created. So a lot of investment has gone into also our creation studio, making sure that our customers can create the gifts that they want in the way that they want. And I'm really fortunate to be able to help them with that, because it's very important that I can give them the assets and the direction to help them really accentuate their memories the best way that they can possible. So really with Photobox, in terms of brand direction, experience, especially the customer experience, is everything.
Yeah, I think just along those lines, you can keep the mic for a second. one of the things is as you said, is it's not only the creation of the product, but it's the actual experience that the person who's receiving it has, and being able to take photos of themselves, receiving the gift and the smiles on their face or the happiness, and being able to share that back either with the world, whether it's through Instagram or through Photobox, like those kinds of things, and connecting people is certainly something that resonates really strongly.
And that's the point where a brand really becomes a part of the family, and
Right.
that's that positioning, especially as we go into 2020. People want to be a part of a tribe, a part of a community. It's not about just purchasing a product like it was, post-industrial revolution times. So that's why I think we're really hitting the nail on the head, and I can't wait to see how we really expand upon that into 2020.
Yeah. All right, Derek, you're up.
In terms of customer experience, because we're a digital product, we don't do much. There's no real physical experience to what how people experience TransferWise. But one of the things we try to do within digital product design is try to make the experience really beautiful, simple, easy to use, and delightful. So we're starting to add things like illustrations or delightful pieces of copy that make the really boring act of sending money either to yourself or someone in your family a memorable moment right at the end. So we have pieces of copy like, if you strapped that to a cheetah, it would have taken I think it's 2 days longer. And the fact that stuff actually resonates with people, because somebody got back to us and said, you actually didn't consider the fact that Puma needs to stop for food and stop for sleep, so your calculations are actually out. So those are the type of things we try to do. Yeah, those are the type of things we try to do within our experience to get people to talk about money transfer, because nobody talks about that stuff in a pub or out with their friends.
Right.
Did you reply to the person that asked?
They formulated a reply, but I've not actually seen it yet. I do want to see it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the beauty of social media, right? Instant response, and people.
Exactly. I mean, there was a big discussion about it.
Yeah, I'm sure there was. I don't know, Sam, if you wanted to jump in terms of crafting various experiences, and I mean, this is really based on the iconic moves, right?
Totally, yeah. I mean, there's sort of two sides to this. Two sides to what we'd say. One side is, yes, we want to invite our clients to make their brands really present and to make their brands really tangible. They probably need to think more about experiences and less about standard advertising, because that's how to be present in the year 2019 2020. There's also something which we're kind of more and more conscious of. Most of the time when I kind of do a speech or a panel, I'm up with other marketing services companies. So it's actually a little unusual for me. So I realize actually part of experience, which we're starting to think about ourselves, is the experience of our own customers. When a client works with Interbrand, what's the experience like for them? Mm-hmm. Which you kind of obviously have to, if you're advising clients this the whole time yourself, then at a certain moment you have to kind of turn the lens back on yourself. So there's kind of thinking which we're doing around that. But yeah, it's vital. It's how you it's kind of the key word for differentiation these days is experience.
Yeah. I think one of the things to keeping the conversation going on this is you start to think about the overall customer experience. It's the authenticity that you've talked about, Sam. It is making sure that you're not trying to present yourself. Think of like the Pepsi ad, right? That's the most famous one, right? And so how do you start to think about that authenticity of your brand and the underlying DNA and the core of what you align and stand behind, whether that's corporate social responsibility, or that is just staying true to your own DNA? How do you start to think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a massive question, because we've been talking a lot about sort of shape-shifting brands, and actually how we think that certainly the fastest growing, biggest brands have relatively little that they're just not willing to compromise on. So how do you ensure that you don't end up with a kind of Kendall Jenner in the denim jacket situation? I don't know if I have a really good answer to that, to be honest. I think there's a point about credibility and stretch which totally still applies, and a point about kind of trying to be relevant in a genuine way rather than in a kind of opportunistic way. And I think that I kind of, part of me wishes we had kind of some kind of metric to be like, oh, this is at the opportunistic end, and this is at the credible end. But I think it's actually a bit more about judgment than that, and a bit more subjective.
Yeah, I don't know if you find the same thing, but a lot of folks are thinking about corporate social responsibility and trying to come up with something that they are passionate about, right? And I think that becomes that's what seems disingenuous.
Totally.
Versus saying it doesn't have to be social responsibility, but it is core to who you are in your DNA. And I don't know if the one that comes to mind, I've got a 14-year-old gamer, right? And there's a company called Razer, if you are all familiar with it, where they make all these gaming equipments, headphones and computers and mice and all sorts of stuff. And it's not about corporate social responsibility, but it's true to their DNA. We're about the gamer, right? And it's the experience of that gamer, and so maybe it's not always the social side of things, but it's really getting back to your roots and who you are and what you stand for.
Totally. I mean, one of my favorite sort of things a brand has done this year is it was actually an ad in one of the papers by Volvo talking about the sustainability commitment, and they're a car brand, so that they have, they're obviously thinking about it naturally. But the basic point they were making was, we're thinking about sustainability beyond the tailpipe, and we're thinking about our whole operations and the operations of our supply lines. And it was just done with authenticity and just such incredible kind of like Swedishness, for want of a better word, that it just was just pitch perfect. And actually probably it's kind of one of my iconic moves in my own eyes, at least, of the last year from a brand, is that, because it was just so well handled and felt so authentic.
Yeah.
And was a big commitment they were making. So good on them.
Yeah. I don't know if you looked like you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I was thinking about the sustainability piece, because obviously, funnily enough, as a media brand, you'd think when you're printing on paper for 40, 50, 60 years, that you kind of be at the forefront of that. But actually found out with Time Out that we weren't really, but with Time Out Markets, we definitely are. So people expect hospitality businesses to deliver some kind of sustainability program. And luckily for us, it's the nature of the markets that we want people to be there. We want people to be in the markets and to eat. So we use glassware, and we don't tend to use takeaway boxes. We do sometimes have them for people if they want one, but we try to focus that effort really hard. And I can definitely share that the bulk of queries that we get from journalists as well as consumers before a market opens is around that. So that is a massive shift. If you can imagine when our first one opened 5 years ago, and probably no one cared whether they were drinking from a plastic straw. But as a brand, we're always trying to do things to make this more intuitive. So at one time, I had an idea that we would use recycled Time Out magazines as straws. And as it turns out, these guys probably know this, you can't do that because print runs. So, you're always trying ideas, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And I would have loved that to have stuck, because what a story that we could have told. And it just would have been nice to be like, we're actually doing something with our old magazines. But that one didn't work. But we're definitely committed to doing the best that we can and trying to make sure that our customers actually get visibility of that. I don't want them necessarily to walk into a market and just think this is just what it is. Like, it is part of our ethos to make sure that we continue to deliver that sustainability piece.
This is kind of an interesting one for me, because I think that while us at Photobox, we are, we're taking a lot away from, like, I've already talked about plastics with packaging, but also we're taking a lot of our plastic products out of the way. In terms of like a social good, I think it's our social responsibility to just make sure that our customers' relationships with those that they are gifting are on point. And really the way that we do that is we call it what you see is what you get, or WYSIWYG. And we just make sure that whatever the customer makes, that's exactly what they're going to get on the product that they print. And we do a lot of like QA testing, making sure all the colors are right, et cetera, to make sure that that final product is exactly what they imagined and created in kind of their screen and also in their head.
Yeah, so I'm not sure I've got the most insightful thoughts on this sustainability stuff, because we're so digital first. But
The most sustainable.
Yes.
yeah, so that's it. Most sustainable. I'm done. So, but we do have a debit card that we send out to our customers, our TransferWise customers, and we are looking into using different materials that are biodegradable or recyclable and things that won't stay in the earth for 400 plus years. And to that, I would say, to the Kendall Jenner point, I think the reason why that makes people feel so sick is because it's just not authentic. Like
Right.
when I'm thinking about social causes or standing up for the injustice in the world, Pepsi and Kendall Jenner aren't the people that are at the forefront of my mind, right? So I would say at TransferWise, what we try to do is we believe in a world without borders, that people and ideas and the world works better when people can move out walls being built. So we try to do everything, in our copy and our language, all of that stuff. So.
Yeah, well, actually, staying on that point, how do you actually get that ingrained in the culture of the organization? Are there things that the company's doing, whether it's from an internal brand team, whether it's corporate communications? Like, how are you getting that?
So we have a really, really solid onboarding process for all of all of the new people who joined. Yeah. It's just me shouting at them. Just to get them on board to the company culture, for them to understand what we're about. TransferWise obviously deals in lots of international money transfer, and we have, I can't remember the number, I think it's 80 plus nationalities. So people are drawn to the company just for that alone, and they see it in our website and our communications and all that stuff. So we tend to hire people who believe in the same mission as us, and that's how it gets embedded in the culture of the business. It just doesn't live in PDFs or slide decks on people's desktops.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, so I just we have a few minutes, and we're going to open it up for questions. If folks have any questions, we also will have time afterwards in our networking. But maybe we'll start with you, Derek, since you got the mic. If there's anything that you've taken away from, whether that is the brand consistency, whether that is the experience, whether that is anything related to the topics from today, something that you think would be a good kind of takeaway for the group?
I really liked, I feel like I talk about consistency a lot, so maybe. But the experience stuff is actually really interesting, and I think it's something that we could really take on board at TransferWise. How do we get people to care about that stuff? How do we get people to care about the fact that your banks are ripping you off when you're spending money abroad? Yep. How do we visualize that in the physical space? How do we build a community around that and spread the word? Yeah.
All right.
I think my kind of key takeaway, and maybe I'm kind of old school in thinking this, but I think now more than ever, with the advent of social media and the customer having a voice and that voice being heard by everyone else, that brands have to make sure that they are very customer focused, especially because the way that brands are developing now, it's brands are really a cornerstone of customers' personalities. Like, they align to a brand not because of what they're selling, but what they stand for, what their product does for them. And so I think just the big takeaway from what I've heard, both from an experiential and also from a social good side, is that just to keep those things in mind, because customers are not after just the product anymore. It's very much about what is behind the product and the people behind the product.
So for me, I loved seeing that selection of different brands and how they're moving all the time. And it was really making me think just about that competitive landscape. So brands are changing all the time. And I've been told in meetings many times recently, like, Rosie, how do we compete with Google? How do we compete with Facebook? And I'm like, we can't compete with them because we're a media brand. And I think that part of it is such a shift. For someone to turn around and say that media brands have to compete with the likes of Google, etc., is really huge. And that applies from both a hospitality side as well, where constantly we're like, actually we find that the bulk of people find information about a physical market from Google. So if our information is incorrect there, how do we don't need to compete with Google, we just need to make sure that the right information is provided that's aligned with them. Yeah. So I guess for me, our brand heritage is really strong, and we're proud of it, but also we have to work in this new landscape, which is challenging because Google always wants to stop people going to places like Time Out to get their information. They just want to serve it right there, which for us is tricky. Yeah. So just trying to find workarounds for that and making sure that we're getting our information to as many places and as many people as we can.
Thanks. I'll replay the compliment. Actually, I loved hearing about is it Market? Time Out Market? I loved hearing about, partly because it sounds cool and I like the Time Out brand, but also purely selfishly. When we talk about iconic moves, which we do a lot at the moment, One of the things we get dinged for a little bit is it sounds like, partly because of BGB and the best 100 brands globally, is we get dinged for being like, yeah, but that's just something which really big brands can do, or that's not for us, which is totally and utterly not how we see the world. And it's also not true of our business, because we rank the 100 biggest brands, but actually in terms of doing brand work with clients, it's a much bigger mix than that, and often, much more often than not, the world's 100 biggest brands. So it's always great to hear about something which is a really exciting, bold move like Time Out Market, which everyone was really suspicious of at first, which is always a kind of a good sign, which, you know, is a new role for your brand. So I'll be stealing that one as an example.
Awesome. Well, first off, thank you. We can give him a round of applause. We do have a microphone. If does anyone have any questions, we can open it up to questions. There we go.
Yeah.
Hello. I'm interested in the Time Out Market thing. It was completely new to me until I was in Dumbo a few weeks ago and saw that. How did the discussion go? As I understand it, you brought together your favourite existing hospitality brands, which presumably have existing logos, typography, colour schemes, and you've brought them and decided to let them sit under your brand. How did that discussion go, and how did you get them on board?
So I guess the first thing about Time Out Market is it is the world's first market that's built on editorial curation. So it's built on what our editors loved. And when you go to a chef and you say, we really love what you do, you are the best burger in the whole of New York City, you know, do you want to be a part of that? It tends to be relatively straightforward conversation. So that's good. But in terms of their individual branding, we're actually, we feel quite strongly that, yeah, you'll see the signs, they'll be all uniform the same, but everything else underneath and around them still has their own flavor. And that's key, because if we're saying this is, you know, the best burger or the best sushi or the whatever it is, it needs to have that. It can't just be branded Time Out absolutely everywhere. So we have our branding. Obviously, we have a color scheme that we try and get them to align with. But I feel definitely like when they're talking about their menus and when they're on their own social channels talking about Time Out Market, they definitely have that flair. And it's really, really important to us that continues. So far so good. You see anything that looks terrible, let me know.
We had another. Yep. Or you could shout.
I was going to ask André, actually, with Photobox, you talked about the experience that the receiver gets when they open something, a gift. How do you get to test this experience before you actually deliver this product? Do you do any sort of testing, and how do you go about it?
Yeah, so in terms of actual, like, the products that we send out to customers, we don't test every single product that we send out, like, with them opening it, but we do have focus groups, and also we do actually go and visit customers and really just kind of watch them go through that unboxing experience. But I think a lot of it has to do also with intuition. Like, you can research for days, but I think we all know what it feels like to open up, you know, a birthday present. So it's quite easy to kind of go and target that in that sense. So while we do kind of focus our research and kind of testing on other bits, that kind of experience of opening a gift, I think it's a bit more given than it is like us trying to create something different. Like, we're just going with the natural kind of emotions that people have.
This one's for anyone, actually, because I know we've all been talking about brand and consistency, and where I've worked as a digital designer, sometimes there's always a point where you feel like you want to do something and step out of the brand. At what point do you feel like the brand should evolve a bit more? I think TransferWise, you talked about sometimes you bring in the illustrations to evolve the brand. At what point do you ever, like, take a step back out of the brand and look at it from a different perspective and make a decision? When do you make that decision?
That's such a hard question because I've been struggling with that myself. Like, I think part of it is because we have sort of a first iteration of where we want to be. We knew we wanted to be in terms of look and feel, and we're kind of there. And we have to make a conscious decision and effort to step back and say, okay, how can we improve this? Is this the right thing to improve? Does it still feel like TransferWise and part of the DNA? Will it be effective for our customers, and will it be bought in internally? Like, there's all these questions we have to ask ourselves before we jump into doing something like that. In terms of when you mentioned the illustrations, it was clear when you went through our customer experience and our customer journey that there was something missing. Our experience was boxes, forms, and numbers, and there was no reason to use us over your bank in terms of experience and being memorable and building a community around that. So there were clear gaps that we knew we had to fill, but now we've got more of a fully realized system. You've asked the hardest question that people ask me at work, so I don't have an answer, sorry.
Something tiny. It is media specific, so bear with me. That's my background, all right? So in terms of, for us, we have one thing that we're really consistent with our covers, and it's our logo and the positioning of that logo. So it's always top left-hand side. But obviously with the front cover, it's not going to look the same every week. It's going to always have different things. Sometimes we have people hand drawing them. Sometimes we have someone who we've never worked with before who's responsible for the cover, or we're using a piece of artwork that, is super famous on the front. So we are always kind of testing and trialing new things. And I think that's a real positive. Like, we have to keep the brand consistency, and we do it in a really uniform way. Obviously, we've got different color tones that we can lay over that if we need to make it look more visually attractive. But so long as you've still got your brand in there, I think that individuality and the flair is the thing that actually brings excitement to people when they see that cover, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'll just jump in here too. One of the things that our type designers actually work a lot on is assessing sort of the type use in the brand system. Using something that has flexibility, whether that's going to different geographies, whether that is actually getting an umbrella brand that can hover over lots of individual brands as well, and really trying to figure out something that has the elasticity. What should I use when our voice needs to be playful? It doesn't always have to be good too. We work with folks on choosing type. You may not want your brand font used when you're talking about something that is of a serious nature or an issue, especially in social media these days, right? So how do you think about the broad use of typography in your brand system that gives you the flexibility to do that?
Yeah, actually very similar to what you just said, Brett, is going back to when we know how to evolve it. What we do is we test it on things like social media, Instagram stories, and we push it in that way. And if people respond to it, then we can see how that can creep into the core product, which we have to be a little bit more conservative because it's dealing with people's money and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I think you might have to come up here, or you could just shout. It's okay.
You've got all of the customers creative that they're sending you all the different photos. How do you ensure that your branding still stands out when you've got such a vast, the creative is so different? And also, do you have any kind of restrictions in place to ensure that your branding, your logo, doesn't appear next to some creative that doesn't fit with your brand values?
So interestingly enough, the branding should never show up on the customer's product, because in terms of outside of the logo, maybe on the back of something, when I kind of create graphics for our customers to use to make their products, I remember my boss telling me it should be everything except being on brand. It should have a look and a feel. From a strategic standpoint, it should be on trend as well. And it does live within kind of a greater universe, but there's a little bit more flexibility because we are we're selling products that our customers are making for them, not Photobox so much. So we get that branding kind of in the packaging, but after the packaging is the customer's creation, and we want to make sure that we don't get in the way of that. And so in terms of negotiation, we always put the customer kind of creation first, and then like I said, with that, there might be a logo on the back or something to that effect, but it's quite minimal, just because again, just celebrating the customer's creative spirit and like that gifting aspect is a bit more paramount to us, especially when you're dealing with photography, which, as you said, it can be so varied. It's just really important that like we've decided as a brand for our product to kind of put that first, and then kind of our logo as an accentuation, not so much as like the dominant feature of our product.
Awesome. So I'm going to let you guys off the hot seat. I know Anna's great job, so thank you again for